Hi, fourth graders. Happy Friday. I am back with a couple more chapters of our book. Hopefully this will tide you over for the weekend, and we should be able to finish it next week. So we are on chapter 33, A Whole Extra Character. Tilly headed back downstairs to find Oscar laughing with Jack as he cut out intricate flowers and vines from colored paper, and Grandma spoke to someone on the phone behind the till. Everything okay? He asked as Tilly sat down. We need to chat in a bit, she said vaguely. You know, about the stuff we were talking about before. Oscar looked at her quizzically but nodded. At that moment, Grandma came back over and put a gentle hand on Oscar's shoulder. It's your mom on the phone, Oscar. She wants a word. Nothing too serious. But Oscar was already on his feet, heading to the till. His Mamie has to go into hospital for some tests, Grandma said to Jack and Tilly. His father needs to look after her, so Mary's got to get the train over to pick up his sister. She's asked if Oscar can stay over here tonight, and maybe tomorrow too, depending on whether she needs to help with anything in Paris. I'm guessing Oscar's going to be feeling a bit delicate, though, so we'll need to all rally round and make sure he's doing okay. Oscar came back to the table, looking a little wobbly. Did Mom tell you? He asked Grandma, who nodded. We're very happy that you're here, Oscar, even though it's in slightly sad circumstances. But it sounds like there's no need to worry, and they're just going to make sure everything's okay. So I'm sure your mom told you. It's just easier for your dad to have Emily over here for a little bit, and we could certainly do with another pair of hands for the party tomorrow night. Look how much you've helped already. Tilly, why don't you take Oscar upstairs and get the spare bed sorted for him? Tilly nodded, and Oscar followed her out of the shop and upstairs. Are you okay? She asked quietly. I'm sure she's going to be fine. I guess, Oscar said. I know she's going to be okay. I just wish I could have gone too. I don't really want to talk about it right now, though, if that's okay. What was it you wanted to say to me earlier? Okay, well, let me know if you change your mind, Tilly said. And what I needed to talk to you about was that yesterday, after you left, I went inside a Little Princess to try to see Captain Crew. You went book wandering without me? Oscar said, affronted. I didn't plan to, Tilly said. I wanted to see my dad. The words still felt foreign on her tongue. What? It's what I'm trying to tell you, Tilly said. After you left, my grandparents told me the truth about who my father is. Oscar's attention immediately snapped from being frustrated he'd missed a book-wandering opportunity to entirely focused on Tilly. The truth? Well, what they said about him dying before he was born is true in some ways, as he died in 1900 and something. Inside a book. What? My father is Captain Crew. Oscar looked baffled. From A Little Princess. He's the main character's dad, and he dies. But how does that even work? Oscar stuttered. What does it mean? Turns out no one knows. It's really not supposed to happen. My mom got into loads of trouble for falling in love with him, and it means I'm technically half fictional, although I don't think there's an official word for it. And did you find him? Oscar said when you went in. What was he like? I saw him, but I didn't talk to him. But then it got even weirder, because when I tried to get back, the last page of the book had been torn, and I ended up in the underlibrary, Tilly said as she found some clean sheets and towels and a new toothbrush. And the other thing is that I found a copy of A Little Princess in Chalk's office that's different from mine, and from all the normal ones. I checked the copies in the shop. What were you doing in his office? Oscar asked. I sort of broke in accidentally. He went mad when he found me, Tilly said. Oscar looked at her in surprise. I didn't think you were a breaking into offices accidentally sort of person, he said as they dumped the stuff on the bed in the spare room and went back downstairs. Well, I didn't used to be the sort of person who leaped off the side of pirate ships either, Tilly replied. Fair enough, Oscar said. There's definitely something off about that Chalk guy, though, right? He also seems to be super not into books for a librarian. I can't believe they let him work there. I wonder if he has other books that are different. Can you do the thing you did last time to magic us back there? How did that work? I'm not sure, Tilly said nervously. It's definitely not what's supposed to happen. I could try to do it again, but I didn't do it on purpose the first time, so I don't know if it'll work. I think it must have something to do with the end papers Seb warned us about. When you let the book finish while you're still inside? I suppose if you couldn't read the last line, that kind of makes sense, Oscar said slowly. But didn't Seb say they were dangerous, and you just ended up back at the underlibrary? Yes, but I wonder if it's because of who my dad is, because of how I'm, well, half fictional. Do you remember that Seb said the end papers work as a kind of cushion to bounce characters back if something goes awry? And I guess I'm sort of half a character. That figures, I think. There was a bit when everything just went black and cold and I couldn't see anything, but it was like the blackness just went on forever, Tilly said, shuddering at the memory. It doesn't sound like a fun place to get stuck, Oscar said. And I guess Seb did tell us specifically not to go too near the end of a book. It's kind of risky just to look at some books, and didn't you say the differences between the normal copies and the one in Chuck's office were only small? Yes, but why were there any differences? There's something strange going on. I wish I could just check, Tilly said, unable to ignore the niggling feeling in her brain. And they weren't that small. There was a whole extra character. What did they do? Oscar asked. Not much, really, but where did she come from? Maybe it's just an old version, Oscar said, and the writer changed his mind? Her mind, Tilly corrected. Well, maybe she just changed her mind, Oscar repeated, and took the character out. But why would Chalk have it? It looked like a regular book, and I'm sure that's not how it works, and you can have old copies of famous books with slightly different bits in. I suppose I should ask Granddad. Maybe it's an underlibrary thing. It's the sensible thing to do, I guess, Oscar agreed. Okay, it's decided, Tilly said, ignoring the slight sense of disappointment she was feeling. I'll ask Granddad in the morning. I'm sure he'll know. Chapter 34. The Wrong Place at the Right Time. The next morning bloomed in a buzz of excitement about that evening's party. The family, plus Oscar, were sitting round the kitchen table, eating warm pain au chocolat, when Jack arrived and started unloading all his paraphernalia. The shop was closed in preparation for the evening's party, and he and Grandma planned to bake and decorate treats for most of the day. Oscar and Tilly were sent back out to the shop, with Granddad to start carefully clearing the books from the display tables on the ground floor, which were being turned into a long tea party table. As the three of them made piles of books ready to move upstairs, Granddad hummed happily to himself before Oscar elbowed Tilly in the side and gave her a look. Tilly took a deep breath. Granddad? Yes, love. Can I ask you something? Of course, he said, still piling books up. When I ended up in the underlibrary the other day, Amelia said something to me about my mom. Granddad put his pile of books down and went to sit on the stairs, patting the step next to him for Tilly as Oscar continued sorting books nearby. She said that after she'd had me, Tilly went on, Mom tried to get into the source library, using your key, and that was part of the reason you'd retired early from being the librarian. Well, yes, that's true, Tilly, Granddad said slowly. Your mom got it into her head that she could somehow stop Captain Crewe from dying without leaving a trace in the source edition. She'd convinced herself that if she went with him once his story wasn't on the page, she'd be able to change the course of the story without altering Sarah's. Of course, it wouldn't have worked. It doesn't bear thinking about what chaos she could have wreaked. But Mr. Chalk noticed her in there as soon as she entered, and she didn't have the chance to do any permanent damage before we found her. Was she trying to leave me? Tilly asked quietly. Tilly, she wasn't thinking straight. It was a dangerous, reckless plan that I don't believe she thought through, but I am certain she wasn't trying to leave you. I think that she must have been either testing out whether she could do it with a view to coming back to collect you, or even exploring whether she could get him out of the book without drawing any attention to either of them. How do we know she's not there now? Tilly said. Maybe she found a way back. There's no way she could possibly have got back into the source library without us noticing. Remember, we tried to stamp her to check, Granddad said. Is that why Mr. Chalk hates me so much? Because of what Mom did? Tilly asked. Mr. Chalk is no great fan of our family for many reasons, Granddad said, and none of them are your fault. We never saw eye to eye when we worked together, and B using my key to access the sources was the final straw. He'd convinced himself that I'm somehow still trying to undermine him, even now that I have nothing to do with the underlibrary. That's what he was accusing me of when he burst in here last weekend. He was claiming that Amelia and I were somehow in cahoots, which is sheer nonsense. He likes Amelia about as much as he does me. He had his eye on the librarian job when I left. In fact, after the scandal, he was extremely insistent that I must be forced out if I wasn't willing to retire. But why does he hate everyone so much? Oscar said, no longer pretending that he wasn't listening to their conversation. And how come he can even bookwander when he doesn't seem to like stories? Well, we all have different relationships with books, Granddad said carefully. Obviously Enoch has an important link to them, otherwise he wouldn't be able to bookwander. And as we told you, he's a very diligent watcher and incredibly attuned to disturbances in the sources. He might not be a friendly or a kind man, but he's not an evil one. He's devoted his life to the underlibrary, even if his methods are unorthodox. Talking of which, and just hypothetically speaking, Tilly said, trying to sound casual, say Mr. Chalk had a book, and it was slightly different from all the other versions of that book. What might that mean? Granddad raised an eyebrow. Hypothetically speaking, I would say that I would be concerned as to how you knew that, but also that it was nothing to be alarmed by. If you were to read a book that had someone wandering inside, you would see the results of them being there temporarily on the page until they left, but usually a wanderer will have the book with them. If it was a library copy, it would not be unusual for a librarian to be on a monitored wander. Now, do I need to be anxious about why you're asking that question? Tilly and Oscar both shook their heads vigorously, and Granddad laughed gently and stood up. You're worryingly like your mother, Tilly, he said affectionately. Please be careful. Oscar and Tilly stole a quiet moment to regroup when everyone took a coffee break. So it was just a librarian in the book, Oscar said. That's why it was different, and that's why it was so undramatic. She was buying cake, right? Yep, it was just a woman buying cake. It barely said anything in the bit I read, just that it was cold and she was playing with her necklace. Then she bought almond cakes. Oscar pointed at Tilly's neck and laughed. She's rubbed off on you, obviously. And Tilly realized she was messing with her bee necklace as she talked. She stopped and stared at Oscar. Oh my goodness. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? That you want some cake? He tried hopefully. Oscar, just suppose for 1 minute that woman wasn't just a librarian. Just suppose that woman was my mother, Tilly said, fizzing with excitement. No, Tilly, Oscar said urgently. You've missed out like 1,000,000 steps there to get to that conclusion. You can't go around thinking every random woman wearing a necklace is your mother. That's just not how it works. But it's not a random woman. She's in A Little Princess, where my father is, and she's not in any other editions. But, Tilly, why would she be in a copy and chalk's office? It doesn't make any sense at all. A little picture of the bee necklace. And your granddad just told you they didn't find her in any books. You're seeing her there because you want to see her there. Maybe, Tilly said, but surely it's worth going to check. There's no harm in at least trying. No harm in trying out a theory about just wandering off the edge of a book. No harm in sneaking into the underlibrary without telling anyone. No harm in risking running into chalk. And what about Amelia? How would you explain being in the wrong place again to her? Well, you never know what you might find being in the wrong place at the right time, Tilly said. Did you read that in a book? Oscar said. Tilly grinned. No, I made that one up myself. Anyway, she said more quietly, I don't want to go on my own, and I need someone who's best friend material to come with me. Well, I guess we could go while the party is happening, Oscar said, relenting quickly, his cheeks a little pink. Exactly, Tilly said. We could be there and back before anyone's even noticed we're gone. Sounds like Tilly and Oscar are planning a bit of dangerous book wandering. So, maybe over the weekend make some predictions on how this is all going to go, and we will find out more on Monday. Have a great weekend, friends. Bye.